Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudriyet. Srimad Bhagavad-Gita Sadhak Sanjivani 6th chapter Dhyana Yoga verses 37 to 47. Destiny of the man who has fallen from yoga and glory of the man of exclusive devotion. In the preceding verse, Lord Krishna said that yoga is hard to attain for one whose mind is not subdued and who does not strive ceaselessly. So Arjuna in the next two verses puts question about the fate of such an imperfect yogi. Verse 37. Arjuna uvacha ayatiha shraddhyopeto yoga chalita manasaha aprapya yoga sansiddham kam gatim Krishna gachti. Arjuna said, O Krishna, he who, though possessed of faith, is unable to subdue his passions and whose mind deviates from yoga, having failed to attain perfection in yoga, what end does he meet with? Comment. He is imbued with the faith that yoga leads to perfection. So he performs adoration and meditation with devotion and faith. But he does not strive ceaselessly because he has not subdued his passions and controlled his mind. He, thinking of the sensual pleasures because of attachment for them, has not been able to attain the goal of yoga. What happens to such a striver at the time of death? It means that he did not incur sins, so he can't go to hell. He can't go to heaven because he has no desire for heaven. He can't be reborn because he performed adoration and meditation with interest and faith. But at the time of death, other thought comes to his mind, and so he cannot think of God. What will happen to him? Verse 38. Achinno bhaya viprashtas chena brahma eva nashyati apratishto mahabaho vimudho brahmanaha pathi. O mighty armed, deluded in the path of God without any hold, does he not perish like a rent cloud, deprived of both God realization and worldly enjoyment? Comment. He renounces the desire for worldly pleasures, honor and praise, etc., and follows the spiritual discipline, but he is not able to realize God, and at the time of death deviates from yoga, namely, does not think of God. Does he not perish like a rent cloud, deprived of both God realization and worldly enjoyments? A rent cloud does not descend on earth as rain, and this drift of cloud is separated from the main body and can't join the other ones. What is the fate of a striver who renounces his dependence on the world but at the same time fails to realize God? Does he meet with damnation? In the next verse, Arjuna prays to Lord Krishna to dispel his doubt expressed in the previous verse. Verse 39. Etan me sansyam Krishna chetum arhasya sheshtaha tvad anyaha sansyasya chetana heya upapadyate. O Krishna, it behoves you to dispel this doubt of mine completely, for none other than yourself can clear this doubt. Comment. No one can dispel this doubt completely. A puzzle of the scriptures can be solved by scholars possessing knowledge. A yogi who has attained this state by practice can know the solution to a certain extent. But you are the omniscient. You know the fate and end of all creatures. So you can dispel this doubt of mine completely. In the next verse, Lord Krishna clears the doubt raised by Arjuna. Verse 40. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Parthane Vehana Mutra Vinashastasya Vidyate Nahi Kalyana Krit Kaschit Durgatim Tata Gachati. The blessed Lord said, O Partha, there is no fall for him either here or hereafter, for none who works for self-redemption meets with an evil destiny. Comment. The striver who, without being attached to pleasures and prosperity, is engaged in spiritual discipline to attain God realization has no fall because God is his savior. One who is engrossed in the welfare of all creatures and thinks of God realization is the most loving to God because he is his fragment. So, he has his real affinity for him. How can he meet with ill fate? Sometimes it may seem that he has fallen to a state inferior to what he had already attained, but it so happens because of his pride. The Lord gives him a warning so that he may be aware of his state and turn towards him again with zeal. Lord Krishna disappeared during his drama, pastime, of human life from the midst of the gopis. At that time they were very much perturbed and were at their wits' end. Then he again reappeared and said to them that he had disappeared, adoring them. Their welfare and memory were lingering in him. When a person is inclined towards the Lord, he is most loving to him because he had lost his way but is again following the right way. God, like the mother, always promises the welfare of a devotee. It means that impressions of spirituality, once germinated, can't be wiped out because whatever is done for God becomes real. Namely, the real never ceases to be. Therefore, Lord Krishna here says that one who works for self-redemption never meets with an evil destiny because the impressions of the past always inspire him towards spirituality. Even if he goes to the lower births, his nature will be superior to that of other members of his class. In the previous verse, Lord Krishna assured Arjuna that there is no fall for a striver either here or hereafter, and he never meets with an evil destiny. Now, Lord Krishna in the next verse answers the question put by Arjuna in the 37th verse about the striver who has failed to attain perfection in yoga. Verse 41. Prapya punya kretam lokan ushitva शाश्वती हा समहा शुचीनाम श्रीमताम गेहे yoga bhrashto abhijayate. Having attained to the world of the righteous and having lived there for countless years, he who falls from yoga is reborn in the house of the pious and prosperous. Comment. Heaven is attained both by those who perform penances and actions with some interested motive, and also by those whose aim is to realize God, but who deviate from yoga. But there is a vast difference between the two. The former, having enjoyed the heavenly pleasures, return to this world of mortals on the exhaustion of their merits, and thus they can stay there for a limited period only, while the latter can stay for unlimited period because their aim has been God realization. But because of having a latent desire, they go to heaven and can stay there for the duration in proportion to the store of their meritorious deeds. But they can't be entangled in the pleasures there. The reason is, when even the seeker of the yoga transcends the fruit of actions, how can one who has deviated from yoga get entangled? The pious and prosperous are those who earn their livelihood by honest means, who never have a claim on others' things, whose conduct and feelings are pure, who don't attach importance to worldly pleasures, and who regard all the resources as the means to attain God, while those who regard themselves as master of the riches and lay claim to them are not indeed pious and prosperous, but are their slaves. In the next verse, Lord Krishna, of his own accord, describes the destiny of other strivers who fall from yoga. Verse 42. Athava yogi nameva kule bhavati dhimatam etadhi durlabhtaram loke janmayad idrisham. Or he is born in a family of enlightened yogis, but this kind of birth is very difficult to obtain in this world. Comment. The dispassionate striver is born in the family of the enlightened yogis who have realized God and are fixed in Him. Such a birth is very difficult to obtain in this world. In the family of the enlightened yogis, the strivers get the favorable environment which draws out the latent yoga element in them and leads them rapidly towards their goal. In the next verse, the Lord explains what happens to a dispassionate striver after his birth in the family of enlightened yogis. Verse 43. Tatra tam buddhi sanyogam labhate parvadehikam yatate chatato bhuya sansiddhao kuru nandana. There he regains the knowledge of the previous birth and he strives more than before for perfection. O joy of the Kurus. Comment. A traveler while traveling on foot feels tired and sleeps on one side of the footpath. But when he awakes, he has not to cover the distance which he has already covered. Similarly, the striver regains the knowledge of the previous birth. He is like a student who goes through the old lessons and grasps them immediately. Thus, the favorable impressions of the previous birth are aroused in him. In the favorable surroundings, the striver strives more than before for perfection. Now the Lord describes the striver who deviates from yoga and is born in the house of the pious and prosperous. Verse 44. Purvabhyasena teneva haryete hyavasho api saha jigyasur api yogasya shabda brahmati vartate. The one who takes birth in the house of the prosperous, though subject to the senses, feels drawn towards God by force of the former practice, because the seeker of the yoga of equanimity also transcends the fruit of actions performed with some motive as laid down in the Vedas. Comment. The striver who is born in the house of the pious and prosperous does not get such a favorable environment and company as the one who is born in the house of the enlightened yogis. Yet, because of sacred and spiritual propensity stored up in the previous birth, he is drawn towards God in spite of his attachment to pleasures. He has lived in heaven for countless years and enjoyed pleasures there. And in the house of the prosperous also there are pleasures in abundance. He is overpowered by his senses. In spite of all this, he is drawn towards God by force of the former practice of the previous births. The reason is that the lust for pleasure is unreal, while the influence of the spiritual life is real. So the real influence draws the striver who deviates from yoga towards God. An exceptional fact. 1. Such strivers who practice yoga but deviate from it are very rare. Among thousands of people, scarcely one strives for perfection, and it is he who deviates from yoga. There is great glory of such strivers. Even the seeker of the yoga transcends the fruits of actions, namely, he develops disinclination even for the highest level of existence, the Brahma Loka, that is, the abode of Brahma, because all the worlds, including that of Brahma, involve return and rebirth, while he does not want rebirth. When there is so much glory of the seeker of yoga, how far superior should the striver who practices yoga be? The reason is that his aim has been to attain yoga, equanimity, though at the time of death he has deviated from yoga. Therefore, if a striver has an exclusive aim to attain God realization, he will transcend the fruits of actions performed with some motive as laid down in the Vedas. True, even if a striver fails to attain equanimity, he should have it as his aim. As Tulsidas ji has said in the Ramchit Manasa about himself, that he is a man of the meaner sort, but his ambition is very high. He wants to get nectar, though even buttermilk is not available to him. It means that the striver should have a lofty aim, and he should have a keen desire to achieve that aim. It is God's nature that he does not mind the error of the striver, but he notices what he wants and remembers hundreds of times what he has in his heart and is pleased with it. A blind saint went to a temple to behold the Lord. One day a person asked him why he had gone to the temple when he was unable to see the Lord. The saint replied, "It is true that I am unable to see him, but is he, God, also unable to see me? My purpose is served when he, God, beholds me." Similarly, we may not attain equanimity, but we should have an aim to attain it. By doing so, our purpose will be served, because God is omniscient and he knows what a striver has in his heart. Now, Lord Krishna in the next verse describes the condition of the striver who, having deviated from yoga and taken birth in the house of the pious and prosperous, is drawn towards God. Verse 45. Pratnad yatmanastu yogi sanshuddha kilbishaha aneka janma sansiddhastato yati param gatim. The yogi who strives with assiduity, purified from sins and perfected through many births, reaches the supreme state. Comment. In fact, every human being has passed through many births already. Therefore, he has been called Aneka Janma Sansiddha. In heaven, he enjoyed the fruit of his virtuous actions and thus was purged of virtues. In hell, by suffering tortures, he was purged of sins. Similarly, in the 84 lakh forms of life, by getting the fruit of his sinful actions, he was purged of sins. Thus, by being purified from virtues and sins, he has perfected himself. Secondly, a human being, by striving assiduously, can attain the supreme state or supreme goal, because the Lord by his grace has bestowed upon him this human birth, the very last of all births, so that he may attain the supreme bliss. Therefore, every person should strive assiduously to attain perfection or the supreme bliss. In the next verse, Lord Krishna describes glory of yoga. Verse 46. तपस्वी भयोधिको योगी ज्ञानी भयो अपि मतोधिकः कर्मी भयश्चाधिको योगी तस्माद् योगी भव अर्जुना. The yogi is superior to ascetics, given to worldly pleasures, superior to men of learning even. He is also superior to ritualists. Therefore, Arjuna, be a yogi. Comment. An ascetic is one who bears hardships voluntarily in order to obtain powers and enjoyments here and hereafter. A yogi is deemed superior to such ascetics because he, through desirelessness, attains the supreme goal. Jnani in this context are those who possess knowledge of the scriptures, such as the knowledge of the disciplines of knowledge, action and devotion, etc., and deliver discourses, but whose aim is to enjoy pleasures and prosperity. A yogi is superior to such men of learning. A yogi is superior to those ritualists who perform the elaborate rituals such as sacrifice, charity, and pilgrimage, etc., in order to obtain pleasures and prosperity, etc., here and hereafter, because his aim is to realize God, while the ritualists have a desire for the worldly enjoyments. Thus, a yogi is superior to ascetics, men of learning, and ritualists, because his aim is to attain God realization, while their aim is to enjoy worldly pleasures and prosperity, etc. Ascetics, men of learning, and ritualists, all the three are engaged in activities. Forbearance in ascetics, Learning in Gyanis and rituals are the special characteristics of the three. All the three having selfish interests are not yogis but bhogis, sensuous. If they had been selfless yogis, God would have neither compared them with a yogi nor would he have declared a yogi superior to them. Lord Krishna in the next verse orders Arjuna to be a yogi of devotion. Verse 47. Yogi namapi sarvesham madgatinantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yo mam sami yuktamo matha. Of all yogis, he who devoutly worships me with his mind focused on me is considered by me to be the best yogi or the most devout yogi. Comment. When a striver accepts the affinity that he is God's and God is his mind gets engrossed in God automatically. As the mind of a girl after her marriage is absorbed in the affairs of the house of her father-in-law, a devotee's mind gets absorbed in God without making any effort. His mind, while he performs several duties of his routine, clings to God automatically. All activities, whether spiritual, such as meditation, adoration, etc., or physical, such as eating, sleeping, or pertaining to livelihood, such as farming, business, or service, etc., of the devotee who becomes only God's without having any attachment to the world, are included in adoration. The devotee who is the most devout will get mastery over all kinds of disciplines, yogas, such as of action, knowledge, and devotion, etc. Because God is the great Lord of all the yogas. And when a devotee takes refuge in Him, he becomes the most devout. The most devout devotee never falls from yoga because his mind never abandons the Lord, and therefore the Lord also does not abandon him. At the time of death, because of unconsciousness or much pain, if he is unable to think of God, God thinks of him. So, how can he fall from yoga? It means that the devotee who wholeheartedly depends on God without depending on anyone else or on his efforts does not fall from yoga. God does not let him fall. But he who attaches value to worldly things and relies on his efforts, for him there is possibility to fall from yoga. His fall may be due to his mind's diversion towards the world. A devotee does not fall because at the time of death he calls the Lord as he depends only on him. Even if he is unable to think of the Lord thinks of him because of his exclusive devotion, and thus he, instead of falling from yoga, attains him, God. Om Tat Sat. All glories to Sri Partha Sarthi, Lord Shri Krishna. All glories to Bhagavad Vani, Srimad Bhagavad-Gita, Sri Hari Arpanamastu.